they used to say I belong to a sect which is called Chabad, Lubavitch, Hasidim. So a lot of emphasis on joy and love of one's fellow and so on. So for example, so in Israel, they're in some neighborhoods where if you drive on the Sabbath, they'll throw stones at you. Right? Did that ever make a person more religious? Besides for being totally against Jewish law, because you could kill somebody, it's totally against Jewish law. Yeah. Did it ever make a person more religious? I never heard of such a thing. So in Kfar Chabad, which is where all the Hasidim live, so they used to say, if somebody's driving their neighborhood on a Saturday, they say, oh, come in for a meal, come join us.
Yeah.
Say l'chaim, some whiskey. Like, come join my family. Like, embracing people. And you know what, that's going to have more of an effect. Yeah. They'll say, gosh, you know, even though I offended him by driving through his neighborhood, he didn't throw stones at me. He welcomed me with love and with open arms. You know, that's going to have far more positive effect. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, a lot of these people are doing it for self-gratification. You know, all these extremists, they're doing it for their own ego. They're not doing it for God. If they're doing it for God, they would look at the consequences.
Yeah.
And it's very painful.
Yeah, painful.
The media exposes.
Very sad.
And we have to remember also is people. We were talking about the media before. Yeah. So in a lot of the ultra-Orthodox communities, they're not on Facebook and Twitter and all these things. They don't use mobile phones. They don't use modern technology so much. So they don't realise that maybe 100 years ago, if an incident happened in a little village somewhere in Poland, so it stayed in Poland, right? It stayed in the village. It stayed in the family.
Because
nowadays, anything that happens is immediately on the internet.
Because of information technology.
It's very interesting actually, because we have a saying in our teachings. It says that there's know what is above you, an eye that sees, an ear that hears, and everything is written in a book. So I gave a sermon about this. I said, you know, the book is called Facebook. Yeah. Because now, you know, when you're in university and you're having a party and you forgot even. You were drunk and you were behaving badly and someone's put a photo on Facebook. Yeah. Everything you do is recorded. Yeah. So it's the same, people don't realise. And these images are being shown to the West and people don't appreciate stones being shown to people. People don't realise, the effect it's having. It's very, very sad. It's very sad. All I can do is in my own life try to be a shining example. Have a positive experience. Yeah.
I appreciate your liberal attitude to the society. Do you heard about the Cochin synagogue in our state?
Not really.
Not really.
You told me a little bit.
Yeah. Kochi was a very ancient synagogue. Right. 2000 years history we have in synagogue there, and the Jewish people are settled in Cochin. It's called a Jewish town. Right. Its area is Jewish town. Yeah, right. I said that the Cochin was the first mayor was as a Jewish man. Right. We have a very nice harmony. Community harmony was there. They haven't faced any problem during their settle there. But nowadays only 1 or 2 families live there. All others are migrated to Israel. When after established Israel, almost the community was migrated from there. And nowadays only synagogue, only 1 or 2 families, I think, living in Kochi.
You probably get a lot of Israeli travellers.
Yeah.
India in general, you have an enormous transitional Israeli population. When they finish their time in the army, Israelis like to go to Asia.
Yeah.
You know, they go to India, they go to Thailand, all these places. Yeah. A friend of mine was telling me he went to this Indian village where everybody knew all the Hebrew songs because the guys would come with their guitars and sit around.
Yeah,
but you don't have a permanent population.
Yeah.
And but Israelis that come are not religious.
Yeah, the Israelis are, so many visitors are coming from Israel in our place, and they want to see.
I saw towns in India where, I haven't been to India myself actually. No, I haven't been. But I saw towns where they have Hebrew signs now because there's so many Israelis coming through. Yeah, but they're temporary, obviously.
Have you heard about a Knanaya community from Kerala who claim following the Jewish tradition?
Right, well you mentioned a little bit as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting, for years and years nobody wanted to be Jewish because it was to be cursed to be Jewish, pogroms and all these things. And suddenly now, we live in times where it's quite, everyone's suddenly discovering they're Jewish.
Yeah.
So there are all kinds of issues. It's become an issue mainly in Israel when groups of people, like you had the B'nai Menashe, they were the Indian Jews.
Yeah.
The Ethiopian Jews, these groups that had very distinctive traditions, and they migrated to Israel. And the first question was, do they have the Jewish tradition, the Masorah, the same tradition the other Jewish communities had? And some yes, and some not. In some cases they converted en masse to Judaism just to satisfy sort of any, if you like, religious law. Because, for example, even if you're born Jewish, you can't convert away from Judaism, really. Like, you'll always be considered Jewish, but the thing is, let's say for 3-4 generations a person, practiced a different faith.
Yeah.
So then they come back to Judaism. They go through a symbolic conversion to reaffirm their Jewish faith. So, for example, the Ethiopians, there was a whole question. It wasn't racial. It really wasn't. People said it was racial. It wasn't racial. It was that they had different traditions and customs. People said, well, we don't know if these are Jewish traditions or not. So what we'll do is, the Ethiopian community will go through a conversion. It's not the conversion that, let's say, you go through in England where you have to study for 10 years or whatever, but they'll go through a symbolic conversion. They'll immerse in the mikveh just to reaffirm their Jewish tradition. So with the immigrations into Israel, particularly, it's brought these challenges as to which were the authentic Jewish communities of old. And I'm not familiar with the different history of different communities.
Yeah.
I know, for example, in America you have some communities that claim to be descended from ancient Israelite communities, which possibly would be in dispute. So it doesn't really matter. You can always convert to Judaism, but it's an interesting topic.
No, they are not interested in converting Judaism. They are already belong to the Christian community.
Right.
They are practicing Christian tradition and Christian values, and they believe they migrated to India from Iraq.
It's certainly possible.
And the last 2000 years before they migrated from Iraq to India and settled there, and they believe they are part of Jewish tradition. That's why I'm asking that. Have you heard about anything about that?
Not too much. No.
Not too much. Yes, all right. See.
But I mean, there are a lot of groups like that.
You know,
and I must, in my daily life, bump into people who say, "Oh yeah, my grandfather was Jewish," or my brother's Jewish," or some things.
Yeah.
I'm always meeting people.
I know you are very busy. You are always looking at the clock.
Sorry, that's just about. We have a few minutes.
Very satisfied when John Paul II apologized to Jerusalem Temple for the Christians' cruelty. I mean, John Paul II came in the Jewish temple, and he prayed in the lemon wall, right. and he said that.
I mean, some people found that. Some people actually said, "Oh, that was offensive," but I think he was sincere. There are a lot of very difficult aspects of the Holocaust period. One is the fact that in many countries, particularly the Catholic Church, Catholics occupied, even priests occupied positions of power in government even. I was talking to a survivor from Czechoslovakia. He said not only did the Czech government not resist the Nazis, but they actually paid them to take the Jews. And some of the most prominent ministers were Catholic priests. So it's a very upsetting chapter. There are two aspects. One is the apology, and the other is the change in Catholic belief about the crucifixion, etc. It's certainly progress. I mean, I think Jewish-Catholic relations are better, obviously. It's.
I mean, actually,
there's another interesting issue, which is it is said that that the artifacts from the Holy Temple are stored in the Vatican. You know this.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a contentious issue as well, because if that's correct, then we say, well, what are they doing in the Vatican? We'd quite like to have them back. So. Interesting topic as well. There are also many Hebrew books in the Vatican Library which you don't have access to, so it's an interesting topic. There's still a lot of work to be done, but obviously relations are better than they were in the past, for sure.
Yeah, recently I read a very big book written by H.H. Ben Sankson. It's a very history of Jewish people. The name of the book. I read that in that after finishing read that book, I feel that as a Jewish man, your mind is extinguished with the fire because of Christians done too much cruelty against you. That's why I am asking that question. This statement I
think the bigger issue is the recognition by, I think it was the previous Pope, the recognition and the acknowledgement of the covenant of the Jews. I think that was John Paul, wasn't it? Because I believe to this day, or certainly until maybe a decade ago, there was, even in the Anglican Church, an organisation called the Church's Ministry Amongst the Jews, the CMJ, whose role was to convert Jews to Christianity. Now, when whichever Pope it was came out and said basically there's the Old Covenant and there's the New Covenant, and the Jewish people also have a covenant with God. In other words, you don't have to seek to convert them. That obviously was a very groundbreaking point in interfaith relations as well. One of the challenges of interfaith relations, let's be very frank, with Christianity and Islam, is that Christianity and Islam are proselytizing faiths. So how does your interfaith relationship work if Christians and Muslims sincerely believe that everyone should believe in their religion?
Yeah.
So when Christian groups are saying, well, actually, we do recognize that there is a valid path of Judaism, say, okay, well, that makes it a lot easier to get along. Because as I said earlier, Judaism doesn't have that problem. Judaism recognizes the validity of other paths of religions, so not a problem.
I mean, as a Jew, your heart is satisfied with his statement. That is my question. I mean,
I'm satisfied with it. It doesn't affect my life. Either way, I mean, it's not. I'm not spending my life worrying about what the Catholic Church thinks of me any more than they're worrying about what I think of them. But obviously, for those who are involved in interfaith matters, it's very important, and obviously it has significance.
Yeah. Anyway, according to his statement, the Jewish and the Christian relationship is going up. I mean,
I'm not
come to. I mean, much come together.
You have to remember there was a lot of historic suspicion amongst Jewish people of Christian intentions when they befriended the Jews as to whether they were trying to convert them. I'm not belittling interfaith relations. There are, in our own community, for example, there are a lot of people who are very involved in interfaith relationships. There's a lot of value in it. If nothing else, it means that when there's a problem or when there's tension between different communities, if it happens, then everyone knows who to talk to at the highest levels. When I was in Cardiff, for example, there was an incident at the local mosque where a pig's head was left. They had a vigil. It was on a Saturday, so I couldn't go. I was doing services. But I sent a message, which was read out. Straight away, I knew who to send it to the imam who I was friendly with. And not that there were any tensions, but it certainly built good relations. The Jewish community was standing shoulder to shoulder with the Muslim community. So interfaith relationships, especially when it comes to tensions and racial issues, are very, very important. As I say, from a theological point of view, there's always been a little bit of suspicion of Christian motives because there was always an attempt to convert people. Look, I gave a talk a few years ago for the Council of Christians and Jews in Wales, which brings Jews and Christians together. I gave a talk about the afterlife and life after death and all these things. Afterwards, a fellow came up to me and said, very interesting talk, Rabbi. Do you ever read the New Testament? I said, no, it's not part of my tradition. Why not? It's a bit kind of in your face here. He says, it was written by a Jewish fellow. I said, that's the worst argument you could possibly give me. I said, there are lots of books. I said, Karl Marx was also Jewish. I don't read his books either. I said, you want to give me an argument for reading the Gospels, don't give me the argument that they're written by Jewish people. But, I thought to myself, you can't resist it, can you? You have to try to convert me. This is a bit ridiculous. I've come to talk to you about my faith. Don't force your faith upon me. I'm not forcing my faith upon you. So there's a little bit of suspicion. And the chief rabbi has spoken about interfaith relationships. He says that it works best when we do it side by side, he calls it. So in other words, you have your Friday, I have my Saturday, they have their Sunday, whatever, you have your Sunday, and he has his whatever day, and they have Diwali, and they have Christmas, and they have Hanukkah. We all happily celebrate our festivals, but we all get together, and we all have tea and biscuits or whatever, and we're all friendly and respectful of each other. When it comes to issues like charity or poverty and the environment and racism, we come together. When it comes to issues of theology, we recognise they have different beliefs. So I'm not going to have a joint service with a Christian because they have different beliefs from me. And that works very well. Where it gets more complicated is where you start trying to get more religious. Say, let's have a study session with Jews and Christians together. Well, we've got a problem because we have different interpretations of the Bible. So I don't organise joint study sessions, but I'll certainly have a meeting with Christian ministers to talk about poverty or to talk about secularization of society or talk about racism or how to help immigrants or, I don't know, all these issues, help refugees. I used to work in the prisons as a prison chaplain. I had an excellent relationship with my colleagues of different faiths. We didn't spend our time worrying about whose God is right. We spent our time worrying about the needs of the prisoners, their kosher meals, their emotional needs, about their health needs and so on. So it works fine when you don't get into the theology. When you get into theology, obviously it gets a bit sticky because we have different beliefs. You have to recognise.
Well, what is your point of view? What was the Christ? What is the existence of Christ? You mean?
Well, he obviously existed historically. In Jewish thought, he was a bit of a radical. If we believe the Gospels, he said you don't have to keep the Torah anymore. Now we don't believe that. Now some people say he didn't say that. They say that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John said that later on. But he wasn't a huge figure in. We look in the Talmud. He's mentioned as a bit of a sort of rebel. But he's not a huge figure. There were other figures at the time who were larger in rabbinic tradition. So he definitely existed historically. He wasn't the figure, from our point of view, that the Christians see him as.
What do you see in your point of view? What is the existence of Christ? One more. He's a historian, or
he's a historical figure that existed. That clearly people followed and believed to be a messianic figure. That's clear. Obviously, Christian history is. Although the Gospels don't always agree with each other, which is an interesting topic in itself, but clearly there was a figure called Jesus of Nazareth who people believed was the Messiah and followed until his death. Now, at the time of his death, Judaism would have said, well, that rules out someone being the Messiah, and the crucifixion is not mentioned anywhere in Jewish theology, but obviously Christians went off on a different path. So we don't dispute his historical existence. I think Islam has somewhat more respect for him as a prophet. We just see him as a bit of a rebel, really. Look, as you said yourself, Christianity has led to all kinds of problems historically for Jewish people. So I'm not his biggest fan. I cause certain problems. But he's a historical figure that existed. Certainly he's mentioned in Jewish literature. He's not mentioned as anything other than perhaps a rebel. It says in the Talmud that he didn't agree with his rabbis and he went off on his own. So he wasn't mainstream.
It was